Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. We hope that you enjoy today's sermon by our pastoral staff at Christpoint Church. We also want you to know that if you have any questions, prayer requests, or need information on any of our ministry opportunities, you can email us at www.info@christpoint.church. We love you and we are praying that this will be the best year yet. Welcome home.
Today we're going to look at one. We're going to look at the first one. So let's establish who is the recipient of these love letters. So when people write love letters, they write them to people they love. They write those to spouses, somebody else's spouse, like your presidents, to brides-to-be, to people with deep connections, people that are in love, or people that love each other. So here's the thing. A groom would write a letter to a bride. So who would we write these letters to? Who would Jesus write the letters to? Well, Jesus being the groom and the church, or us being the bride, wouldn't it be thoughtful, wouldn't it be appropriate that Jesus would write letters to the bride, which is the church? Now, if you want scripture on that, there's about a dozen to 15 to 18 scriptures that calls the church the bride of Christ and Jesus the bridegroom. So we're not going to break all those down. What would he have to say? So in order to find what he has to say, let's go back to the beginning and let's figure it out. Exodus chapter 34, verse 1. Now, I love this. I love this because I just see so much real people living real lives, serving a real God. Welcome home. This is what I see. The Lord said to Moses, cut for yourself 2 tablets of stone. Man, sermon right there about itself. And I love this. Like the first. What do you mean like the first? Like the first, and I will write on those tablets. So here we have proof, written proof that God actually wrote something. So I will write on those tablets the words that were on the first tablets. Oh, by the way, Moses, those are the ones that you broke. So I love this. You know, God, I'm just real people living real lives. I got mad at the people. They were rebellious. They were worshiping idols. I mean, look at everything. I just threw the things at them. I just threw them, broke them all to pieces. And the Lord said, Moses, you got to cut some more. You got to cut 2 of these things out of stone by yourself. And like the first ones, I'm going to write on those myself, and I'm going to write the law on those. And you're not going to break these. So Exodus chapter 34 verse 1 says God wrote in stone. So that's the title of this individual sermon, is in stone. So letters, love letters in stone. So let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 9 verse 10. I love this. God wrote these with his finger. So God wrote in stone with the finger of God in the stone and wrote it out, and it was in Hebrew. So I mean, I don't know if it went up and down, left or right, or whatever. But he wrote those himself in stone. So we found something that God actually wrote. He didn't write the whole book. He just wrote something within the book. God wrote, but you notice Moses is the one that had to cut the tablets. Moses is the one who had to cut the tablets. So I'm going to look at that in just a second. He broke the first set. Let's look at Exodus chapter 32, verse 19. He broke the first set. As soon as he came down near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing and all this, Moses burned with anger. And I'm sorry, I didn't give you verse 20. And he threw them at the foot of the mountain, and he broke them. So he broke those at the foot. I mean, just there was rebellion going on. There was everything look at everything God has done for you. I'm gone from you just a short amount of time. I'm bringing back the laws for us to live by that literally makes us a nation. They weren't a nation until then. We're not a nation until we have laws. They were just a bunch of people until they got the law. Then when they got the law, they became a nation. And this is, we can't even get society started without you running off and worshiping something else. So here's the lesson. We are all, every one of us, broken vessels. We're all broken vessels. Romans chapter 3, verse 10, none are righteous, no, not one. Romans chapter 3, verse 23. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. We are all broken vessels. No one is exempt from that. We are His beloved. The church is His bride, and He is our groom. That's just all there is to it. Nobody else is going to fit that. Nobody else is going to wear His tux, and nobody else is going to wear our wedding dress. It doesn't fit anyone else. So He's not talking about someone else. He's talking about the church. So to whom would the letter be written? God wrote this in with His fingers in stone for the church. See, these are the people. He's saying, look, you broke the first set. I'm going to write the second. I wrote the first one. I'll write the second one. I'm going to write this in stone so you know, so the people know that they're my children. You're broken. I know that you are. But let's just digress a little bit. I want to jump onto a side teaching. Proverbs chapter 7, verse 2 and 3. This jumped out at me. I couldn't leave it alone. I had to go there. Now I want you to notice what it says. Keep my commandments and live. Now this is all about where we're at today. Keep my commandments and live. Keep my teachings as the apple of your eye. Now, I want you to notice something. If something is the apple of your eye, it is the most important thing to you. Oh, yeah, that's the apple of my eye. What about those grandchildren? They're the apple of my eye. What about your wife? She's all right. No, you don't say that. You say, she's the apple of my eye. I tell you, when something is the apple of your eye, it is the most important thing to you. It is the thing that you look at, that you envision, that comes into your heart and says, I love you with everything that's in me. Keep my commandments and live. Keep my teachings as the apple of your eye. Now notice something here. Bind them on your fingers. I have something bound on my finger. That says that Tina chased after me 35 years ago, and she can keep chasing after me. I have the microphone. I can tell it like I want it. So, see, bind them on your fingers. You think God may be talking about, let's stop kicking tires. Let's stop dating and let's start getting intimately married. Let's start getting a little deeper. Bind them on your fingers and write them on the tablets of your heart. God said, I wrote the law for these people to live by on tablets of stone, and I'm going to write them on your heart. I'm going to write them on your heart. Bind them with your fingers. In other words, commit to me like a husband and a wife commit to one another. Write them on the tablets of your heart. If you keep my commands, this is what He says, you'll be my bride. You'll be my bride. Why does He say keep my commandments and live and let them be the apple of my eye and you'll make it? It's because God says, I'm not sharing you with somebody else. I'm not sharing you with other idols and other things to worship. So you are my bride. You have a ring to prove it. You are broken vessels. Yes, that's true. But it's okay. It's okay to be a broken vessel. I love you anyway. You're not going to be perfect. Stop trying to figure that out. Bring your heart to me, broken into all of its pieces, because it's the new stone tablet. You bring that vessel to me, and I'll write upon that heart a new name. So, like a bride, what does a bride do? A bride gets a new name. Tina wasn't always a Qualls. I'm just telling you like it is. You guys don't even know what her last name used to be. And so we're going to leave that as a trivia question. So she didn't, she took a new name. God says, I'll write a new name upon your heart. So let's jump back. Let's see what God wrote. Exactly what God wrote in Exodus chapter 20. Now this is the first time. Verse 2. He says, I'm the Lord your God. Now this is what I want to focus on. He began to start writing on these tablets our commandments that are given to us even today for them to live by even then. And he says, I love the prelude here. I love the introduction before he even gives a commandment. I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. I'm the God that did that. I'm your God. So this is what I believe Jesus is saying today by what he wrote to the church long ago. And he's saying, church, now I want you to catch this, listen up. He's saying, church, listen up. I love you, but I don't date prostitutes. That's what he's saying. I love you, but I don't date prostitutes. I love you, but I don't marry adulterers. So we got to get something fixed. You're broken, and we got to get something fixed. I came to give you life, and to give you life more abundantly, John chapter 10, verse 10. I came to do that, but you would rather live in slavery. You have chosen slavery. You have traded slavery for bondage. Now, what you say, well, I didn't know it was going to be this heavy today. Well, sometimes God's not always saying great things. I mean, perfect and wonderful and fuzzy things. Sometimes He's speaking what we have to hear. Because a fair-weathered God is going to tell us what we want to hear. A foul-weathered God's going to tell us what we need to hear, whether we want to hear it or not. So, hey, you've just traded slavery for bondage. You've not even moved out of the land of Egypt. See, you want to share me with everything else. I think that's what he's saying. If I look and I read chapter 20, verse 2 correctly, I think he's saying that. I think he's saying you've got to get this mentality out of your mind. He hasn't even given a commandment yet, and he says literally, he says straight up, I'm the Lord your God. Now let's get something straight. I don't share. He's saying, I don't share. You say, well, that's a selfish God. And I tell you, you're going to share your wife? You're going to share your husband? No, you're not. So God's saying, I don't share. I'm the Lord your God. I'm first fruits. I'm number one. I'm the one who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. You notice it's up and not down or sideways. I brought you up out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Okay, so before I break that down, let me just show you. Without me, this is what he's saying. Without me, your life is bondage. Because you say, well, I don't know about that. Yeah, I do. Because of what he wrote, these people were all free before God came along, didn't they? Weren't they? 430 years they couldn't figure it out. 430 years they outnumbered the Egyptians probably 10-1, and they couldn't overthrow them and walk out of there? No. They were slaves. They had a slavery mentality. And the longer we stay in slavery, the more bondage mentality we adopt. And God says, without me, life is bondage. Your land, your culture is Egypt. He's not talking about, he wasn't talking about the land, the real estate. He's saying literally your culture, what you have created, what you have accomplished, what you have allowed in is bondage, and you don't even realize it. You lived in a place in Egypt where all you saw was pagan worship, and you accepted it as normal. That's just them doing their thing. Just because I don't do it, just because they do it doesn't mean that I have to do it. I agree with it. And believe me, I tell myself that all the time too. I don't know how many things I've got left I can turn off in my house. I've turned off about all of them I can turn off, and I'm about to get turned off by what I turned off. So, figure that one out. So, he says, your life without me is bondage. Your culture is Egypt, is bondage also. You just, it's what you think. And your house is slavery. You notice he said house and he didn't say home. Because Egypt was never their home. It was only their house. See, home is where you can make home anywhere. But you can make home in a car. You can make home with people. But any old place can be a house. Believe me, trust me, I've sold and bought enough of them. I ought to know. Any old place is a house. And I like where I am now, but it is my home. It is where I live. But it is my house too. My home is in Jesus. That's where my home has to be. God gave these people 10 things. 10 laws. Not 100, not 250. They didn't have a vote. They didn't go before council. They didn't have a legislature. God gave them 10 laws. Not so they could drive safely in school zones. That's not why he gave them laws. He gave them 10 commandments to follow, and in turn, it would keep them connected with him. God gives us laws not so we could drive safer. If that was the case, Tina would drive slower. Mace is like, she passed me like I was tied to a stump. And we're passing them. I'm like, please don't blame me. We're going 112. I didn't know the thing would go that fast. So and I'm going to digress just a minute. We're driving out west one time, and the temperature was 114. I took a picture of her driving. She was going the exact same speed as the temperature. I'm like, I'll never see this again. I'll never do it. She's like, what? Get out of my way. Blowing the horn at people. But God didn't give us laws so we could drive better, drive safer. He gave us laws so in turn we would stay connected to Him. There's no other reason. He says, look, there's 10 simple things. Do these 10 simple things and we will stay connected. If you don't do those 10 things, you say, well, that one's pretty hard. They're just 10. They're not 1,000. Just do the one. Get these right, and we will be able to be together and connected. And he says, remember, he says, keep my laws and live. See, church, don't exchange. This is what I feel like the letters would be saying today. Don't exchange slavery for bondage. Move out of the house of slavery. Move out of the house of slavery and into the home of freedom. Without Jesus, I promise you, no matter how you think it looks, your life is bondage. Without Jesus, there is no freedom. So move out from that place that enslaves you, that you don't even know that wants to control you, that you don't even realize is controlling you. And you say, well, I'm fine. I'm fine. I don't need that in my life. Well, right there, pride's controlling you. Believe me, I know I have to deal with it every day. I don't need you telling me what I know. It's like the same old, same old. See, move out and into a place where you can hear my voice. Church, you're not hearing my voice today. You're not hearing my voice, and if you don't hear my voice, it's because you have disconnected from these basic rules. Do you know that the first 4 of those commandments were a direct commandment for us to have a relationship with God? God first. God does not come second or 12th in anything. God first. It is God first. The first 4 is a relationship with God. The 5th is our relationship with our parents. And the last 5 are our relationship with each other. Because here's where we have the most trouble. Because if we get one of these 5 mixed up, this gets messed up and this gets messed up. So you say, well, I don't even know if I can hear the Lord anymore. Maybe it's because we're not hearing His voice, because we're not clearing the air. Well, I can't get anybody to even listen to me about the Lord. It's because maybe we become weak in our testimony. We don't have to have some great somebody died testimony. We just have to have the great I died testimony. That's the only testimony that we need. Church, the love letter, church, you have forgotten your rightful place. I haven't forgotten it. You have forgotten it. And you have forgotten your freedom. You've forgotten your freedom. What would Jesus write today? Church, I believe you're weak. I'm sorry if this hurts your feelings, but I'm talking to the church. God wouldn't write. God didn't write letters to Egypt. He didn't write in stone to Egypt, or to the Ammonites, or the Moabites, or the Jebusites, or the Perizzites, and the Perizzites. He didn't write to them. He wrote to His church. That's what He wrote. And everything that He says is not always going to make us feel fuzzy and warm. You have forgotten your rightful place. Your place is to wear that beautiful wedding dress and stand next to me. That's what you're supposed to do. Nobody else fits it. You have forgotten what freedom looks like. You've prostituted yourself to everything else. And you say, well, that's kind of harsh. I'm talking to me too. I mean, my gosh, I'm the worst. I'm like Paul. I'm the worst. I'm the worst person here. We've prostituted ourselves to everything else, and God says, look, I don't work that way. What would Jesus write today, church? I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're weak and you lack power. You're weak and you lack power. I was listening to a guy the other day, and he said our church has through COVID, exploded, and we have 3 times our attendance than we did this time last year because it is absolutely Holy Spirit filled, and people are coming from everywhere. I think that we're that close at Christpoint Church to that revival. You can feel it. Now, here's one reason I know that we're that close is because the devil always fights hardest where he fears most. He's scared to death. He's scared to death. He wants to make sure that you have an offense towards someone. He wants to make sure that you have something else that interferes with hearing the voice of the Lord. And you know what? We just become weaker and weaker. So this is what I believe the Lord is saying. I will come, if you will come to me, I'll fix that. You're weak, you lack power, but if you'll come to me, I'll fix that. And I'm going to show you how to fix it. Step 1 is move out. Just look, I'm the God, your God, that brought you up out of Egypt. So that's step number 1, move out. Move out, but Pastor, that's not easy to do. I know it's not. And you say, well, what do you mean? If you've ever been addicted to anything, you know how hard it is. If you've ever overeaten and you want to go on a diet, you know how hard it is. If you've ever just gotten in a routine, which takes about 20 seconds to get in a routine that is not healthy, you know what I'm talking about. So what I'm saying is, God says, move out. That's what you got to do. You got to move out. And when you get moved out, then we can fix it. So that's number 1, move out. Get your mind moved out. It's not going to work just to get our bodies moved out. Get your mind moved out and get that bondage mentality out. Egypt was literally, I've always said this, why did God let them wander in the desert for 40 years? Because if He'd have taken them from Egypt to Sinai to the promise, they would have just carried their slavery mentality right into the promise. God's not going to birth something in the promise that's not Him. He's just not going to do that. So He had to take them from point A to point B to let all of this get out of them before He could enter into a rightful nation. So step 1 is to move out. Step 2 is Matthew chapter 21, verse 33. Matthew chapter 21, verse 33. Now this again, written by Matthew, not by Jesus, inspired by Jesus. There was a master of the house who planted a vineyard, and he put a fence or a wall around it. He dug a winepress in it, and he built a tower, and I'm going to add above it. So think about this. We have a vineyard. You say, how does this step 2? We have a vineyard. We have a fence around it. We have a winepress in it, and we have a tower above it. Because vineyards have one purpose, and that's to make fruit. That's what the purpose is. There's not a secondary purpose. It's not so they can look pretty. Vineyards are there to make fruit, to make grapes. So you can't just move your heart out of bondage and expect everything to go away. So it will always want to drift back. So we move out, and then we build a wall around it. Not the kind of wall that keeps God out, but the kind of wall that keeps God in and everything else out. So we have to move out, relocate. We have to build a wall around it, build a wine press in it, because grapes are not going to serve their purpose if they're not crushed. So what that means is, and I don't know if you know this or not, but literally wine presses were literally dug into solid rock. They may have dug them sometimes into a side and then put like some stone around, but most of it was literally chiseled out of stone, complete stone. And then they got in there and they started mashing grapes, because that's all they had to drink back then. So build a wall around it, build a wine press in it, because sometimes the crushing is not always what we want. Sometimes the pressing is not always what we want. Sometimes it just does not feel good. Build a tower above it. So remember, I'm going to break this down. We're going to roll on. Vineyards are for grapes and grapes are for wine. Number one, walls keep things out. They create boundaries and identify what's ours. If I can build a wall, I'm watching some people in our church right now. They have moved out and they've built walls. And they've built wine presses and they've built towers. And they mean to serve the Lord. They don't mean to ever go back to that old lifestyle. I'm going to serve the Lord if it hair lips whoever. I'm going to do it. So keep things out. Walls keep things out, create boundaries, and identify what's ours. Wine presses, it's where the grapes are crushed to make wine. Beautiful things come out of being willingly broken. Let me say that again, and I would like to say that I coined this phrase, but this came from Sarah Keller a couple of weeks ago. Beautiful things come out of being willingly broken. Crushing has great value, but also has great blessing with it. And think about this. Shoes are not allowed in the wine press, because when they're crushing the grapes, shoes are not allowed because, number one, you have to be able to feel the seeds. If you crush the seeds, then it makes the wine bitter. And with shoes on, you can't feel the seeds, so you'll crush those, and thus the wine becomes bitter. So when they're crushing, they have to feel, I feel that seed, and I cast it out. Because you know what? If we're not allowing ourselves to become crushed in the right way, all we're going to do is make ourselves even more bitter. And number three, build towers. The difference between walls and towers is the distance that you can see the enemy coming. Sometimes we need to make sure that we have somebody on our tower while we're building our walls. Because your friend that knows how to pray for you will sit on that tower as a watchman, and they can see the enemy from a long way away. And when your friend comes to you, and this is a good friend. When your friend comes to you and says, I need to talk to you, I'm afraid that your focus is a little bit off right now. Your first reaction is to be offended. Your second reaction should be that, no, devil, get out of here. And your third reaction should be, would you pray with me? Thank you for coming to me and loving me enough to say it. Hello again, and thank you for tuning in. I pray that today's sermon has spoken to your heart and has ministered to you well. We just want you to know that we have two locations, one at our Sparta campus, our main campus at Sparta on the square in Sparta, and our second campus is at Smithfield behind Ace Hardware. And we would love for you to call Christpoint Church your church home. And if you're viewing this and you can't get in to church and you feel like you want to be a part of the church, then you can always be a part of the church. Just drop us a note and let us know that you enjoy being on board with us. And if you'd like to give and be a part of the ministry, then you can do that by just sending a check to one of the locations at 614 Murphy Street, Smithfield, 13 Liberty Square in Sparta, and we'll get you on the road. We just love you so much, and you can download the Christpoint Church of Tennessee app, and you can give online. So we are real people. We're living real lives, and we're serving a real God. And we just want to tell everyone, welcome home. We're so glad that you tuned in with us. Welcome home.